Thank you so much. My name is Vanessa Hauc. I'm a journalist from Telemundo Network. But truly, I am an environmentalist at heart. So it really fills me with hope to see this type of events and this platform for us to come together and learn and do something about bettering our future and the future for our children. So we have seen over the past 2 days that food is a key element, a very, very essential part of solving this situation that we're going through as humanity. So now we're going to talk about the role of cities as an engine of change in this food revolution, and also what can we do as individuals to put our part and to be agents of change. So we have a wonderful panel that I would like to invite to the stage. First of all, I would like to invite Professor Eeva Furman. She is the director of the Environmental Policy Center and the chair of the National Expert Panel in Sustainable Development. So please take a seat, Eeva. We also have with us Mr. Niels Lund. He's the Vice President on Health Advocacy of the Novo Nordisk Institute. Thank you, Neil. And thank you. And we also have Mr. Martin Palmer. He is the Secretary General of the Alliance of Religion and Conservation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we were having an amazing discussion this morning and thinking about the many things that we can talk about. But first of all, I would like to give you the opportunity to explain to our audience why it's important for you to be here.
Okay, so thank you very much, firstly, for the invitation. And as someone said earlier today, she liked very much complex things and that things are very messy. And I like as well. And I don't know if I like that the world is messy, but I accept it. And I see that cities are also messy. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of difficulties there. But there's also lots of possibilities to organize it in a different way. And I see that we need new types of ways to find the solutions. Some very practical ones, because we talk about these systemic ones, but we need to link the systemic ones to the policies, infrastructure, the food chains, and the practices, and then the behavior, groups and individuals. And I see that experimenting together with multi-actor groups is really the kind of solution for that. Because there you bring very practical problems together, and then you solve them. And I give you an example, if I may. This works for schools, but it works for actually in any kind of issues and actually in any kind of context around the world as well. We work very much with schools. And the school kitchens are now expected to provide more sustainable food and more healthy food because the government has decided that. So they are a bit lost because, as we all have heard, you need to give up eating so much animal protein and rather eat the vegetarian one. But our children, they don't like to do that. And what happens? Then we get even more food waste, which is even a bigger problem. So we started to experiment. We as researchers, we work together with the pupils, with the kitchens and with the municipalities, and try to find new ways of doing that. And actually we found, because we asked the pupils to challenge the kitchens, and we asked them to do the menus for the week. And you know what came out? They wanted to have spicy food. So 1 + 1, you solve the spicy food by putting the spices to the vegetarian food. Yes. And there it was. The children started eating that. So this is just an example. We did several other quizzes and all kind of challenges to encourage them to taste different proteins. Yeah. But this is just an example how we could in a way, deal with any kind of issues from the very top to the low in cities.
And a good important thing to remark here is that when you impose things on children or on anybody or the society, it's harder. I mean, things have to grow organically. So if they want to make the changes, it's easier. And Neil, you have worked for a long time on lowering the rates of diabetes and obesity. But right now, what we have been hearing for the past 2 days is not very good news in many of
we're not
the
doing
places.
that well. No.
What is going wrong, and what can we do right to make it right?
So the story about the growth in diabetes is actually a little bit a positive story. It's a story about economic growth, or the flip side of that. We live longer, we become more prosperous, and we take up we move from rural areas to urban areas, and we take up a number of lifestyles that actually are challenging. At the same time, we're also keeping a lot of people with diabetes alive due to improvements in treatments. So, all of that adds up, and there's some structural things that we can't do anything about. Becoming older. We can't do much about our genetic composition, but it's going the wrong way. If we look over the next couple of decades, we will go from 450 million people to 750 million. And that is a lot of people. To bend the diabetes curve, so flattening it at 1 in 10 people with diabetes on the planet in 2 decades from now, we need to reduce obesity by 25%. How is that possible? I don't know. Food is obviously part of that solution to address that. But if we actually are able to reduce obesity through many of the policies that have been discussed today, then we can actually avoid 100 million cases of diabetes. And diabetes is not a fun disease to have, particularly not in its late stages. So what can we do? We have looked at, we have a program called Cities Change Diabetes. We work with 15 municipalities around the world to try to understand what puts people at risk, particularly the most vulnerable. Because they are the litmus test of what positive change we can actually do if we can address their challenges. And we've done both quantitative and also more qualitative assessments to do that. But just give me one, 5 of the cities are in China. And there's an interesting example from China about the complexities of diet and vulnerability. Because of the one-child policies, Chinese families are quite small. Grandparents often play a role. Because there's only one child, there's only one to spoil, and that is often a challenge. And that's the typical perception of what you need to address. But what has come up in our analysis is that memory of hunger. So the grandparents' memory of hunger back from the 70s and the Cultural Revolutions, and the challenge of of hunger and the never again impacts their worldview and their approach to nutrition. So they will spoil their grandchild at any cost, so to say. Both because it's a lonely child often, but probably also because it's so deeply ingrained with them. But it also shows that to be able to address this major challenge, it's not just about information. It is also about addressing the social factors and the cultural determinants of health.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's so interesting. And Martin, we were talking this morning about that it's so important for cities to put this platform and make it easy for the people to be healthy and to live sustainable. But ultimately, it's up to us, to each one of us. So what could we do to plant the seed of sustainability and healthy eating in the people?
Well, the world I work with is the world of religions, and the faiths provide about 500 million meals a day around the world. They provide that through the schools, they provide that through the hospitals and clinics, they provide that through the welfare work they do, but they also do that because they celebrate the great passages of the rites of life, births and marriages and deaths. They celebrate the great seasons of the year. They know how to tell a story that engages you. I mean, think about Passover. That same meal has been celebrated for probably nearly 3,000 years. We've in a sense, what we've tended to do by focusing so much on what people ought to do is that we haven't focused on what people enjoy doing. And although sometimes religions have had a bit of a reputation of being a bit of a dampener, we also do know how to party. And one of the points I've always made to the environmental movement, which I worked with most of all, is they're constantly telling us to fast, constantly telling us to give up, to simplify, and so forth. And yes, religions do that. In Christianity, we have Advent and Lent. In Islam, you have Ramadan, which we're coming to the end of now, thank goodness, because my Muslim colleagues are unbearable when it's this kind of weather. And in Buddhism, we have a Pansa period. Yeah. But then we party. We have Easter, and we have Christmas, and we have Eid al-Fitr, and we have Wesak. So part of the message that the faiths can give is stop telling people off. Stop telling them that they can't do things, and start telling them the things that they can do, that they can celebrate. And that's one of the gifts that the faiths have. We can tell stories about why it's significant to consider food sacred. And the moment you consider food sacred, it alters the relationship. I grew up on a huge working-class housing estate on the edge of a city in the UK. And the food that we could buy in the shops was dreadful because it wasn't profitable for any of the big companies to be out there. The only places where food was different, was interesting, was school and the churches. And that's where I learned that food can be fun.
Okay, wonderful. Neil?
Can I just build on the faith aspects, because it's interesting that and a big surprise to me in the program that we are running, that it has come up as a factor. In many places, those most at risk of diabetes are often lonely, and they have a big mistrust in the establishment and the health system and so on. So how do you? I mean, they won't go to the health promotion center because it's not for them. So how do you bridge that gap from loneliness to community, and from mistrust to trust? There we can see, and that happens in a number of cities, but most clearly in Houston, we can see the faith community. So churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, and so on have joined together to, those are places where people trust each other and where they don't feel lonely. Exactly. And this is a place where then you use that as a Trojan horse, so to say, to communicate the messages around healthy behaviors, healthy eating, slowly building that trust in the healthcare system, doing referrals to if you need it, and so on. And that is an idea that started in Houston but has mushroomed and now is going to be implemented in Leicester, another city, and maybe also in Korea. And it seems like across the globe, there is an aspect there where it's. This is a powerful force of change, at least in the program that we are working with.
You mentioned China. We do a lot of work in China with the Taoists and the Buddhists and the Confucianist communities. And the reason we do that is the government came to us as a religious organization of religions and said, our biggest problem is, this was in 2006, we created the most selfish generation in China's history. Single-child policy, plus the arrival of consumerist capitalism, which for Marxists is a little bit of a challenge intellectually. And we've created the most selfish generation. The only place we can see where there is a sense of greater responsibility, a sense of being part of something bigger, is in our religions. And we were asked to actually broker partnerships with them. So it doesn't surprise me, but it does delight me that you've discovered that.
It did surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah. There are nice examples from China also, by bringing people together and bring city people together with the farmers and solving these problems of for example, food security. And so I think one thing that cities can do is actually bring spaces where people meet and where they can actually spend time in nature, but also be active and do sports and recreation. And I think if we are starting to pick certain illnesses, it's not really beneficial for the big one, because there are many illnesses that are really these modern urban illnesses that are all interconnected. And if the cities can develop a infrastructure that includes lots of spaces that are green and also spaces that we can share, that's really important. And another thing, it's not really enough that we make the spaces. We also need to make it possible for people to use these spaces. Yeah. Okay. That's really crucial.
So creating these spaces, the cities will give the platform for the citizens to be more more healthy. What have you seen that it works in lowering the cases of diabetes and obesity, Neil?
Peer support. I think if there's one thing that really works well is peer support, particularly in bridging the trust gap that often there is between the formal health system and health promotion and with people. There's an example from Copenhagen where that is called in translated a man food, where men, grumpy old men with grey hair just like me, people that are unemployed and living in public housing and are living by themselves, they are brought together, cook meals together with peers, and they will not eat quinoa. They won't eat asparagus. They won't eat broccoli. But they will maybe marginally change their diet to at least in a more healthy direction. And I think that slow improvement and the nudging in the right direction through peer support, and that is across the board. That this is a key factor and a strategy to actually do health promotion, and that can be in diet and can be in exercise and can be other places.
That ties in with a very strange development in the world of religions, which is the massive return of pilgrimage. We estimate that about 800 million people go on pilgrimage each year. And that means that you enter into community for a period. But also what we found is that when they arrive at hostels and the such like, they want food that is much more in tune with their values on the pilgrimage. And so we've witnessed this massive rise, particularly in the big cities that deal with pilgrimage, like Kano in Nigeria. 5 million Sufi North Africans coming on pilgrimage there. Many, many places around the world, China as well. We've witnessed this push by people who are wanting to get out of the city, wanting to experience community, wanting to experience religion, perhaps with that little bit of distance of sort of saying, well, I'm not sure I really believe, but this is very healthy. And then this enormous increase, 200% of increase of pilgrims in the last 20 years, which means a massive impact on the food and energy needs of a city that's a pilgrimage city. And the fact that that is generating new industries, new streams of food development to meet a spiritual hunger that is actually also an actual hunger.
Okay, perfect. Eeva?
Okay, so I would just like to say that even though cities are made out of the people who live there, there are always people who lead the cities and in a way make the spirit. And as was mentioned yesterday, there is actually a momentum at the moment that cities feel pride and they get connected with other cities. And I think that's very much of the power also in all these issues, that they either compete with other cities or then they want to show what they have done. And that happens within countries and between countries. And I think that is a great power that helps with all these issues that we have brought up, the interlinkages between the people and the different communities and the leaders of the cities.
Yes, Neil?
There's one thing I simply have to say about people with diabetes and obesity, and when you communicate to them. There's so many of you who are communicators. They know that something is not right. I've not so far. People who live with obesity, they know that they want to lose weight, basically. So you don't need to. You don't need to tell them that. So please stop shaming. Shaming won't change behavior. Trust me. At least it won't change the 600 million people with obesity into doing something else. And still, media. I authored a small abstract that went viral in the news and was published in a number of UK papers about the progression of obesity over time, over the next 20 years. And all of the newspapers had a faceless picture of some blob. Not a picture of a person with obesity with a face. All of them. I mean, there was not. I mean, so there's also in something about how we talk with and about patients and people living at risk of these diseases that we need to be careful of, because shaming won't solve the problem.
Totally. Well, definitely we have to be more sensible, and cities can do an amazing job, and in countries like the United States are definitely leading the way to sustainability, even though the federal government maybe not so much. So we see this, but it's a job that we all need to do. Each and every one of us can make a huge difference and can have a great impact like the one that you guys are having. And I wish we have more time, but we are running on overtime. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you for listening.